Alrighty, yo, what is going on, everybody? It's your boy, Mr. DDG94 here. Back, hey, reaction video. Today, we're gonna react to how NBA 2K got Michael Jordan back in video games, a retrospective. So we're gonna look at the history of Michael Jordan and video games, and trust me, it is not the best history. It is not a great relationship. Well, now it is. Nowadays, from 2010 till now, it's been a good relationship. But back then, in the 80s, the 90s, the mid to late 2000s, yeah, it was never a great relationship with Michael Jordan in video games. And that's because Michael Jordan owned his likeness before the NBA Players Association changed their rules and basically forced players to be in video games as long as you was active. If you weren't an active player, then you control your likeness. But the NBA controls your likeness if you're an active player. You got to be in the game. It's only right. So that's why we got Michael Jordan in basketball games for them couple of years when he was playing for the Wizards. But anyway, so without further ado, let's get right into it.
Take our friends and fans on a trip into Dreamland. Magic and Michael. Jordan.
If you're a basketball fan, whether it's been for 30 years plus or in the last 10 years, you know exactly who Michael Jordan is. Whether you watched him play in his career out in real time or you have at least one pair of his 14 iconic signature shoes, no matter when you come into loving or liking the sport, it is quite impossible to not see his influence and impact on the sport of basketball. The Baldy Goat is so iconic that even in the face of LeBron James shattering our whole perception of what old age is in professional sports, having arguably the greatest career that we have seen like ever in the NBA, fans are still willing to live and die on the Michael Jordan hill, saying he's still the greatest player of all time.
What you mean by that?
The cult-like belief in the Baldy is astonishing. And hey man, look, if you say he's still the greatest to you, hey, you won't get an argument from me, fam. I don't want to smoke, like not at all. So please, hit the like button. But like I said, his presence in basketball is and was beyond iconic. And much like real life, his virtual presence in NBA video games is just as important. Jordan made plenty of appearances throughout his career in multiple NBA titles, but after a while, we saw him disappear from basketball games altogether in the 2000s. It became an impossible task for game developers to get MJ to agree to lend his likeness in any NBA titles for years, up until 2K Sports somehow finally convinced him to make his grand comeback in NBA 2K11. And Jordan liked 2K so much that he agreed to an exclusive deal, making 2K the only NBA game that will ever, in the history of ever, as long as this deal remains, have his royal airness grace the game. And that exclusive deal has been going on now for 14 years and counting. So the question is, how did they do it? What did 2K do so right that the other developers did so wrong? Well, you guys already know. That's why we're here, my people. We are going to try to get to the bottom of how 2K got Michael Jordan to say yes. So you guys know what to do. Hit that like button, slap that subscribe button for your boy. Welcome to the channel if you're new. Hope you stick around. It's a good time, I promise. Now, without further ado, let's go ahead and get into this. Oh my God. She makes me. 1984 1984, Michael Jordan was drafted to the Chicago Bulls. With his unstoppable high-flying game and his Jordan 1s, he quickly ascended to the most exciting and one of the most popular players in the NBA. Around the 80s, though, the concept of a video game market was at its roots and looked a whole lot different than what we have today. Basketball simulation was still in its infant stage, and there wasn't really a standard set yet for what a basketball game should look like and play like. And with so much competition in the gaming industry at the time, a lot of companies were producing their own vision of what a basketball game should be. So we can pretty much say that developers were throwing anything at the wall to see if it'll stick, and it was a lot of experimenting going on. With the 1980 titles like Pat Riley Basketball, Lakers vs. Celtics, Magic Johnson's Fast Break, I'll even throw in some non-NBA titles like Fast Break, Hoops, and no, those are not the same game. Those are two separate games. Omni-Play Basketball, Super Basketball, All-Pro Basketball. The list goes on, guys. And I know these titles are probably throwing some of you off a little bit. So just for the sake of context of why these games are named the way they are. So if you think of the NBA today, you think of a multi-billion-dollar league, right?
Yeah.
Well, in the 1970s and mostly the 1980s, the NBA was night and day compared to what it is now. To describe the league back then as a whole, wow. How can I put this? Yeah, the NBA was full of a bunch of alcoholics and drug addicts. Like, majority of the NBA was on cocaine and God knows what other drugs they were on at the time.
Up until the mid
Physical
80s.
specimen of athlete you would see today in the NBA.
Up until the mid 80s, around like the mid 80s, I think they did like a clean sweep of a lot of players, which is why back then they used to have like, I believe they had like 5-round drafts. Yeah, they used to have like 5-round drafts because they was cleaning house. The NBA was cleaning house. David Stern was not playing. He was cleaning house. Anybody that was a druggie, anybody that was on that bullshit, yeah, David Stern was cleaning house. That's why they had like 5-round drafts. It was like either 3-round or 5-round drafts, and however many drafts it was, that's what you had. Yeah, you had to. That's what they did, so that way they could bring in younger players, younger talent that was going to have their heads on straight. That wasn't going to have their nose in that powder. You know what I'm saying? They didn't care about you drinking as long as you wasn't drinking and driving. But if you was on that shit, you was the fuck up out of here. David Stern was not playing. He really cleaned up the league. Many people don't know that though.
Well, with the exception of Zion Williamson, of course, that was a very rare thing to come by. So there is a reason why the Boston Celtics and the Lakers combined for the most championships in the league's history. Not only they had the best players and teams, of course, but during that time period, the rest of the league was full of a bunch of dudes in the 1980s and 70s who probably just played for their NBA checks to fund their drug habit and party lifestyle. So yeah, the NBA name alone wasn't a good selling point for basketball games to be sold on, as it had no real value yet at the time. So, if you didn't know, now you know. And hey man, you don't gotta take my word for it. You can go look at plenty of interviews from retired NBA players from the 70s and 80s confirming that half of the league was on drugs. Okay, so there you go. Do with that information that you want. But the very first basketball game with an NBA license would be from EA with one-on-one Dr. J versus Larry Bird in 1983. EA's sequel would be the very first video game appearance for Jordan with Jordan versus Bird one-on-one in 1988.
That shit is terrible.
Electronic Arts was determined to lead the way in sports simulation. Jordan continued to make appearances in EA titles like Lakers versus Celtics, Bulls versus Lakers, Bulls versus Blazers, and the NBA playoffs, and the official Team USA basketball game in 1982, and a bunch of other one-off NBA related games. So all of that was up till around 1992 to 1993. But it's important to note that the mega banger NBA Jam from Midway was released in 1993, but Michael Jordan wasn't on the roster for the original NBA Jam and even the later NBA Jams, which was a very big head scratcher for all the NBA fans in the 90s. Why wasn't the face of the NBA not in the most successful NBA licensed video game of the year?
Because he owned his likeness. Believe it or not, ladies and gentlemen, back then you could actually own your likeness. You could own yourself. You didn't own yourself until you completely owned yourself. Michael Jordan understood this and he owned himself. He owned his brand. He owned that Jumpman logo. Everything about Michael Jordan, including his name, was owned by him. There was nothing you could do. Michael Jordan owned himself. He owned his name. You couldn't say his name without paying him. You couldn't use his face without paying him. You couldn't use his logo without paying him. You couldn't wear his, well, no, you could wear his jersey because that was the NBA. That was owned by the NBA, so you could wear his jersey. But anything outside of the NBA, yeah, you couldn't even really put Michael Jordan into fruition when it came to certain shit back then.
Well, for the ones who don't know, Michael Jordan around 1992 and 93 chose to opt out of the NBA Player Association license agreement and went solo to have full control with negotiating his own licensing deals for his likeness. I found an article from 2013 on ESPN where they sat down and interviewed the creator or one of the creators of NBA Jam and questioned them about why Michael Jordan wasn't in the NBA Jam game. And as the ESPN reporter writes, he says, according to the NBA Jam creator Mark Turmel, there are a few special machines still out there with Jordan actually in the game. I had always heard rumors about these machines, but never knew if it was just some arcade urban legend until I sat down and asked Turmel about his favorite two-man team. And Turmel was quoted saying, the most interesting one was the team of Gary Payton and Michael Jordan. He said, Payton didn't make the cut to be in the game, and of course, Jordan pulled himself out of the licensing of the NBA, so we had to pull him out of the game. But one day, I got a phone call from a distributor out on the West Coast who told me that Gary Payton was willing to pay whatever it cost to get into the game. So we told him what to do in terms of taking photographs. So he sent in photographs of himself and Jordan saying, we want to be in the game, hook us up. So we actually did a special version of the game and gave both players superstar stats. There are only a handful of these machines, but Jordan and Payton did end up being in one version of the game. Wow, that's actually pretty crazy to know that somebody or a group of people somewhere in the world has the most rare machines of the version of NBA Jam with not only Michael Jordan in it, but also Gary Payton, because yeah, I didn't even know Gary Payton wasn't in the game either. So
that's crazy.
Yeah, that's actually pretty crazy to know, and I bet they probably would sell for millions to try to get that game.
Yes.
That's actually wild. So after Jordan wasn't in the official release of NBA Jam, this started a trend of no one being able to convince Jordan to be in an NBA licensed game. And he gave out a lot of no's because you never saw him anymore in NBA related games for the remainder of the 90s era. With the exception of these odd string of games Jordan did say yes to, like Michael Jordan in Flight, Michael Jordan Chaos in the Windy City, and the official Space Jam video game. The failure of getting Jordan to lend his likeness while he was still winning championships was possibly a bit of an annoyance for game developers, as it does leave their product lacking the biggest name in the sport. But there are people in this world that feel there's a workaround for just about any situation in life. And as they say, desperate times calls for desperate measures. EA clearly felt the need to take matters into their own hands. In NBA Live 96, for example, of course you couldn't have Michael Jordan legally, right? But EA programmed the game with secret characters. You simply just had to go to edit roster, type in Jordan for the last name, and MJ would magically appear and become a player that is playable in the game. Konami, another game developer, followed the same idea and did a secret code of their own to make Jordan playable in their NBA game. And apparently, they could do the same thing in NBA Live for some former players like Larry Bird or Dr. J, but that would be short-lived once the NBA Player Association found out about these secret codes and possibly made some pretty sizable legal threats to any game developer that was using likeness of NBA players past or present without paying for proper licensing. So then you started seeing generic unnamed substitutes for Michael Jordan like Player 99. Jordan continued his absence from NBA video games up until the 2000s had came around.
Pretty much, he was here for a good time, not a long time.
Jordan retired for a second time. This time, it seemed like for good, winning 3 more championships after his first initial retirement and his last ring in a tough 1998 Finals series against the Utah Jazz, and hitting the legendary final shot to cement his legacy. But after 3 years of getting into the corporate side of the game, MJ came out of retirement again, believing he could lead the Wizards to a winning record and prove he still can compete at the highest level. And just like Mike changed his mind about retirement, he changed his mind about the use of his likeness. The GOAT was back on the NBA floor literally and virtually. Jordan legally made his return to sim basketball in NBA Live 2000 as a legend player. Then once he made his return as an active NBA player for 2001 and the 2002 season, everybody could have Michael Jordan in their video game once again. From EA, 2K, 989 Sports, and even Microsoft jumping into NBA sim games could have Michael Jordan. Even though it was an older MJ, but it was MJ nonetheless. So it was a bittersweet time for gaming developers missing out on his prime years, but for EA, that wasn't enough. They wanted more, right? When NBA Street Volume 2 dropped in 2003, they didn't get only one version of Mike. They went as far as to put 3 different eras of the GOAT in the game. Young Mike with the hair, prime 90s, baldy Mike, and current Wizards Mike, giving fans the opportunity to put all 3 eras of MJ on one team if they wanted to. Basketball fans rejoiced at the moment in time that finally they could play as the greatest of all time. After being deprived for the entire 90s era, NBA Street Volume 2 would go to be the most successful out of the series and join the list of being one of PlayStation 2's greatest hits. But this joy wouldn't last very long, unfortunately, because soon after 2003, Michael Jordan would retire again for the 3rd time, and this would indeed be his final time. And as he left the NBA for good, he took his virtual presence right along with it. Jordan ceased to exist in basketball games again and went back to saying no to gaming companies to let them use his likeness. And this would continue for the rest of the 2000s. And I'm starting to notice a trend here, right? Let me get off script for a second. It's just something I'm noticing as I'm putting this together. This is just a thought, and it's probably an obvious reason, right? But with Jordan pulling his likeness away 2 times for almost decades at a time, I think being the perfectionist that he is, MJ clearly was not satisfied with the technology of the times. And wasn't very fond of how he was being portrayed in the games through the years.
Probably, or he was probably trying to make his own basketball game, and the companies was like, no. Like, really? Michael fucking Jordan, you not gonna make a video game specifically for me and how I want it? No. Well, fuck you then. Take me out the game. Don't use me no more. Fuck y'all.
As detailed oriented and precise Jordan is as a personality, if he couldn't see himself being shown in the most authentic and accurate way possible, then he was fine with not having a presence in the basketball genre. And I guess you can call it selfish, right? But I mean, if you had a chance to put yourself in a movie or a video game, you would want it to be a perfect representation of you, right? And when you're the GOAT, how could you want less? I mean, can we as fans really be mad that the greatest player demanding the best for his likeness in video games like he demands of himself as an athlete? And Mike was even quoted confirming this theory. Now, this quote is from Jordan when he was on his press run for NBA 2K11. He said, "I didn't want them to put me in there if I didn't look like myself, and I didn't want them to put stats that weren't my stats." The guys at 2K are very smart, so they know a lot of things about the game of basketball, and obviously the things that I've done to the game and the way that I played. I wanted my character to be as close to the way I played as possible, so that it's not something that's false promoted. I wanted something real. So walking it back a bit, 7 years have passed and now it's the 2010s, and the sports genre was evolving, but there was no MJ in any basketball game still, and the basketball genre saw a lot of changes happen over the course of the 2000s, right? Like we noted in our Midway video, a lot of competition in the NBA market had become very slim. Midway filed for bankruptcy. Konami just fell off completely in the sports genre and was forgotten. Sony retired the 989 name and just turned to focus on only MLB simulation. Microsoft tried to do NBA games, but they didn't stay around very long, which only left EA and 2K as major players in the sport. After a nasty battle in the NFL market, and EA had to clearly focus on Madden after they did that ginormous deal for the NFL, and they needed to make good on that deal, so NBA Live saw a decline in quality. But 2K was raising the bar. After losing the NFL, Take-Two was putting in maximum effort into their basketball series, and it was clear with the release of NBA 2K10. Taking inspiration from their 24/7 mode in previous 2Ks, Take-Two created a whole new mode and called it My Career. For the first time ever, NBA fans could create a player and have an NBA career. No more creating a player and adding them to a roster to live out your pro dreams. You could be an actual legit NBA prospect in a career, something basketball fans were thirsty for. And it's actually funny when you think about it, how EA had a career mode in Madden 07, but never bothered to have an NBA career mode until NBA Elite 11, and they let 2K beat them to the punch. So, you know, that's like a 4-year gap between a game like Madden 07 coming out in 2006 and 2011, 2010 with NBA Elite 11. So yeah, that just shows you where their priorities were at. So in between EA choosing not to try anymore in the NBA market and all of the other developers were out of the picture, 2K was the only viable option left to do the impossible, getting Michael Jordan back in video games. So we're on Kotaku, and no, I know Kotaku, this is an old article. So this is when gaming journalism actually was good. So yeah, we're on Kotaku. I found this article from 2010 leading up to the release of Michael Jordan being on NBA 2K11. Of course, there's no definitive way because this was airtight. I mean, nobody knows how much the deal is or anything like that. So the greatest NBA basketball player ever hasn't appeared in a video game since 2003, but over the years since 2K Sports, NBA 2K team built a contingency plan to bring back Michael Jordan, and we'll see it realized in October. With our development team, the reality is Michael Jordan has been a part of the discussion for years, said Jason Argent, 2K Sports Vice President of Marketing at the time. He said this wasn't some discussion where we woke up and found out we had him. Now we had to figure out how to put him in. There has always been this loose design out there to how this could happen, and as it came to be more realistic, our development team got more and more excited. It says, in some ways, getting Jordan for NBA 2K11 was more daunting than shelling out whatever it costs for the endorsement of basketball's only truly global superstar. The current top player in the NBA is still featured in the game as an active player. Jordan, retired since 2003, must either be a very expensive figurehead or must be integrated meaningfully into the game, and the latter means more money and time on top of the cover art deal. LeBron James absolutely was a part of the discussion for NBA 2K11, Arjun said. He always will be as long as he is a premier player in this league, and he definitely is, Arjun said, but we all had a different level of excitement over the opportunity of putting Michael Jordan in the game this year. Oh, okay. Wait, so LeBron, because LeBron was on NBA 2K14, right? He didn't get a cover until 14. Well, that's actually really interesting to know. Like, so LeBron was going to be on the cover of NBA 2K11 if they didn't get Michael Jordan. So that's actually some information that I did not know. And we're also on this article from CNN. Now, this is more so from Michael Jordan's perspective of why he decided to also agree. So, you know, it gives a little bit of insight. I try to do my best to find the best information, right? So let's go ahead and read this. He said that my kids were always asking me, why are you not in the video games? And I never really gave it a thought until now. Jordan said in a telephone interview, in essence, it gave me an opportunity to be exposed to a generation that I'm probably more recognizable in terms of the Space Jam movies with Bugs Bunny, as opposed to me playing. Visual Concepts and 2K Sports have put together the most realistic looking and feeling basketball game yet in their series. After 12 years, the development teams have made the most of new technology to give players more control and options and realism. Now, in this particular section, I think that really sums it up pretty good of why Jordan decided and why 2K got him. And it said it was connecting with a new generation of basketball fans, Jordan said, that persuaded him to say yes to working on a video game for the first time when NBA 2K11 came calling. That became a great opportunity for me, he said, and that's how I felt this game could connect the dots between Space Jam and his basketball career, he meant. But yeah, man, that pretty much just sums it up, man. I mean, I wish it was like a more dramatic or more exciting reason why Jordan decided that he wanted to get back into video games and how 2K did it. But I mean, more so on 2K side, right? 2K pretty much for years was building the blueprint of NBA 2K11 conceptually of how that they wanted to accommodate, you know, an entire vast majority of the game mode and everything dedicated to Michael Jordan, and really their commitment to capturing his likeness in the way that Jordan wanted, because obviously Jordan was just not satisfied with whatever the other gaming companies and developers were doing. Developers, I guess you can say that they were very careless with his implementation, because at the end of the day, Jordan is bigger than the game of basketball. And that's just a fact. That you can't change that.
That's a fact.
I don't care if that personally makes you feel away, but that's a factual statement. Michael Jordan is bigger than the game of basketball in his career, and even till now, he's still bigger than the game of basketball. He was bigger than the NBA. Michael Jordan, you can say, was at least a good vast majority part of why the NBA was able to globalize their league in the very first place anyway. You know, because like we said, the NBA it just was not the league that it is today. And Jordan was that golden goose for the NBA, right? To ascend them, especially in the move that they made to go to the Olympics with the NBA players. And of course, you know, Michael Jordan being on that team was even more important. You know, it would have been important if it was just Patrick Ewing, Charles Barkley, and Magic, Bird, and, you know, David Robinson and all of them. It still would have been exciting. But we're talking about Michael Jordan, a guy who was bigger than the league and transcended not only basketball, but also he just became just a pop culture figure, period. You know, he was beyond a basketball player. So, you know, yeah, Jordan just wanted to be integrated in a meaningful way, and a lot of developers outside of 2K, including EA, they just didn't do that, and Jordan didn't appreciate it, so he was just like, hey, pieces. Yeah, I'm not doing it unless y'all gonna give some care to it. So there you go, guys. There you go. But yeah, man, if you made it to the end of the video, I appreciate you. You are a real MVP. And yeah, man, hit that.
Yeah, man. So that's just gonna about do it for this one, man. It is what it is, man. It is what it is. But nah, man. I can understand Jordan's frustrations with previous games. I can understand EA was probably taking too much advantage of it. Maybe the having 3 versions of Jordan in NBA Street Volume 2 was overkill. Maybe it was the way he was portrayed in the games. His stats didn't match up. His accolades didn't match up. You know what I'm saying? He didn't play. Maybe his character in the game just didn't play. Excuse me, how Michael Jordan wanted him to play. So it is what it is. I think that there may have been something to do with that. But yeah, man, that's just, yeah, man. It says a lot, man. But you know, 2K definitely came through and got the essence of Michael Jordan correct. If there's one thing I will say, 2K got the essence of Michael Jordan correct. They did not drop the ball on that one. When they got Michael Jordan exclusively in 2K, they did not drop the ball. 2K11 was a fucking problem when it came out, bro. And boy, was that a fun time. But it still ain't fucking with 2K14. I'm sorry, but 2K14 is the better 2K. I don't care what anybody says. But anyways, though, that's just gonna about do it for this one, man. Let me know what y'all think down in the comment section below. I'll get back to you. Till then, peace out. I'm going to bed. Good night.